Well, Andre Bazin sees that photography freed painting in a way. Before the advent of photography, realism was what painting tried to achieve. He talks about perspective as being a technical change that sort of made this possible. Now we're developing the sophisticated tools and techniques to create likeness, and realism was possible. But still, Bazin notes that there's a certain subjectivity that's inherent in painting. It has the shadow of the human touch, as he says. And so with painting, one can never be sure that what one is seeing in the painting is an actual representation of something in the world. With photography, that's different. The image is the object itself. The image of the model is the model. And after the advent of photography, when technology now can capture likeness, can capture reality in a way that's objective, in a way that painting cannot be, painting then was free from its commitment to realism and could move on and explore an aesthetic that is not representational.
Il y a Brigitte Bardot et Michel Piccoli. Il y a aussi Jacques Palance et Georgia Moll. Et Fritz Lang. Les prises de vue sont de Raoul Coutard. Georges Delerue a écrit la musique. Et le son a été enregistré par William Cavell. Le montage est d'Agnès Guillemot. Philippe Dussart s'est occupé de la régie avec Carlo Lastricati. C'est un film de Jean-Luc Godard. Il est tourné en scope et tiré en couleur par GTC à Joinville. Il a été produit par Georges de Beauregard et Carlo Ponti pour les sociétés Rome Paris Film, Concordia, Compagnia Cinematografica Champion à Rome. Le cinéma, disait André Bazin, substitue à notre regard un monde qui s'accorde à nos désirs. Le mépris et l'histoire de ce monde.
I agree with Bazin that photography is a type of mummification, a type of preservation. You're preserving the object in time. One of the things that makes cinema, film, different is that you're capturing the object in time and throughout time. You're adding the element of duration to the image. You know, it's not that film is just images captured through time, as well as in time. Bazin sees that there's a language to film, and this language emerges from montage. So the ability of a film creator to juxtapose images against one another allows them to explore metaphorical or allegorical relationships that might exist. And so a viewer, in turn, has to interpret film. They have to understand what are the salient features that connect these images that they have been seeing together. And it's with the introduction of the montage by Griffith and then later Sergei Einstein's use of it in their films, for him really begins to create cinema that is fundamentally different than photography. I mean, you can juxtapose images in photography, of course, but you can't do that throughout time. That has to be static. So you can display two images together, or you can have two objects that share some sort of relationship, both captured within the film, but that's static. And in the interpretation of photographs, it's much like the interpretation of paintings. And of course, I'm no expert at either. But with montage, he sees that you have to understand the language of montage. You have to understand the language that the director is speaking metaphorically with their film. Now there are folks who reject this. Gregory Curry, for example, in his book, can't recall the title of his book, but Curry argues that cinema is essentially images, and it is pictorial, and that we don't need this talk of semiotics in film at all. We understand it just as we understand any other image. I don't know. I think I tend to come down on the side of Bazin that film cinema requires interpretation, and that interpretation can be the everyday viewer who is able to make the connection between two images that they've just seen through time, a montage or a juxtaposition of images. Or, you can look at it psychoanalytically, for example. But that sort of film interpretation, I don't think, is what's required. I think that, but at the base, there is some interpretation that happens anytime we watch a film, and we don't need to be Freudians in order to engage in that. I'll read. This is Bazin, page 24. I will distinguish in the cinema between 1920 and 1940 between two broad and opposing trends. Those directors who put their faith in the image and those who put their faith in reality. By image, I mean here, broadly speaking, everything that the representation on the screen adds to the object there represented. This is a complex inheritance, but it can be reduced essentially to two categories. Those that relate to the plastics of the image and those that relate to the resources of montage, which, after all, is simply the ordering of images in time. Under the heading plastics must be included the style of the sets, of the makeup, and even to a point, and up to a point, even the performance, to which we naturally add the lighting and finally the framing of the shot, which gives its composition. As regards to montage, derived initially, as we all know, from the masterpieces of Griffith, we have the statement of Malot in his Psychologie du Cinéma that it was montage that gave birth to film as an art, setting it apart from mere animated photography. In short, creating a language. So we have the contrast of montage, of combining these images to add, to enrich them for the viewer to interpret and understand the relationships that exist and are being drawn or alluded to. And then we have use of the camera in a way that Bazin discusses Citizen Kane, and the fact that sometimes the camera doesn't move, it's stationary, and you have the scene in front of you all in one shot, not this editing. He talks about the editing of dialogue. So one person speaks, and of course the camera is on them, and then when the other person speaks, the camera is on that other person. And that makes intuitive sense when editing and putting together. But with Citizen Kane, that sort of use of montage, of editing, was radically challenged. You are not seeing Jarrod right now. First, Cavell notices that there's something puzzling about the ontology of an image altogether. We often say, "Oh, that's a picture of my mother," and that would be correct. But don't we often say, I ask you the portrait, "Who's that?" and you say, "That's my mother." So he discusses it in terms of sound as well. So you have a record that you're listening to, and you say, "Oh, that's a French horn." But it's not, is it? Maybe you can solve this by saying, well, it's the sound of a French horn. But even then, he says, when we look at a French horn, we're not hearing the French horn. We're hearing the vibrations in the air. So there is something a little odd about the fact that a representation is not the object itself. Cavell does, though, see that photography is objective in a way that painting cannot be. He says it's objective in a way undreamt of by painters. But the source of that objectivity is the fact that photography and cinema are mechanically produced. Cavell says that photography provided an objectivity that isn't possible in painting. He agrees there with Bazin. But Cavell says it's important that we realize what the source of that objectivity is, where that objectivity is coming from. And it's coming from the removal of the human agent. It's coming from the fact that photographic images and film are not handmade. They're mechanically produced. And in that, they achieve the objectivity undreamt of by painters. Cavell notes that in a photograph, you're really seeing reality as a whole. So it makes sense for you to ask, what is to the left of the chair that you're seeing right now? In a painting, of course, this doesn't make as much sense unless the painting is supposed to be a depiction of reality. But generally within a painting, the entire world of the painting is within the frame. And so Cavell says it like this: a painting is a world, a photograph is of a world. There's a separation that both Cavell and Benjamin identify, and that's the separation of the world depicted in the image, in the photograph or in cinema, and the world that the person is occupying. I can see into the world of the photograph. I can see into the world that's being projected on the screen in cinema. But that's a one-way relationship. I'm outside of that world. And part of this emerges because of the mechanical nature. I mean, what's the closest correlate of a movie? Well, it's a play. And plays are put on in front of audiences. The actors can see their audience. Many actors talk about their performance being driven by the audience's response. And of course, as I think Benjamin very, very clearly explains in his article, that's not the case in movies. The movie actors don't see their audience. They're not aware of their audience as they're producing their art, as they're acting. Is that alienating? I don't know.